And ours is a peacetime expansion rooted not in a military buildup for overseas conflict, but in a broadening prosperity when America is at peace. We intend to prolong and to protect this expansion, and we'll work with Congress for a sweeping program of tax simplification and reform, and we're convinced this historic legislation can and should be passed this year. America has rediscovered that the key to greater economic growth, opportunity, prosperity for all is to unharness the energies of free enterprise. The American miracle of which the world now speaks is a triumph of free people and their private institutions, not government. It was individual workers, business people, entrepreneurs, not government, who created virtually every one of our 7 million new jobs over the past 2 years. But protecting recovery will require political courage. A federal government that collects nearly 20% of the gross national product in taxes must cease spending nearly 25% of the gross national product in federal programs. Our administration proposes to freeze overall federal program spending at last year's level, to cut $51 billion out of programs in need of restraint, to reduce spending by $500 billion over the next 5 years. And these proposals are rooted both in economic necessity and common sense. To cite one example, revenue sharing. It doesn't make sense for a federal government running a deficit to be borrowing money to be spent by state and local governments that are now running surpluses, thanks to our economic recovery. As for those who tell us that growth and expansion are not enough, that spending restraint is politically impossible, that higher taxes are necessary, our answer is simple. That issue was debated and decided on November 6th. We intend to proceed with the mandate that we've been given by the people. All right, Mike.
Mr. President, Budget Director David Stockman says the taxpayers of this country shouldn't be responsible for the bad debts of farmers. Do you agree with Mr. Stockman? And if you do, why use federal funds to extend emergency credits to family farmers?
I think that Mr. Stockman's made it plain that, in fact, has apologized for some of his remarks, because after 3 hours of what was an appearance before committee in which I think there was a certain amount of harassment and heckling going on, he himself has said that he got a little upset. And no, I think the farm problem is the result of things that have been done in the past. It's the result of the inflationary economy that we had for some time. There are a number of farmers now who their main problem is they borrowed on the basis of inflated land values, and then when we brought inflation down, that left them with loans, and the collateral did not have the same value. And we are making a proposal, and we'll be talking tomorrow with the congressman about a proposal for this short-term problem that will include loans and loan guarantees, some $650 million in that, and then subsequently we will be taking up proposals for hopefully getting the farm economy back into the free marketplace and government out of the agricultural business.
May I follow up, Mr. President? Do you see a contradiction between giving farmers emergency aid now while proposing to phase out price supports and crop restrictions that they've lived with for half a century?
And that's the problem. We won't pull the rug out from under anyone instantly who has geared themselves to these government programs, but the government programs didn't succeed. Many of the problems they face today are the result of government's involvement. And I think you'll find that a great majority of farmers believe that the answer to their problems is out in the free market. And then if government is to help, then we should help by opening up world markets for them, by holding trade negotiations, because much of the farming elsewhere in the world is government subsidized, And we intend to do all that we can. In fact, that was one of the things I talked to the Prime Minister about, and we're both agreed that we should be discussing in the coming months with our trading partners and friends the reopening of trade negotiations to do as much as we can to have free trade and both ways in the world at large. Helen?
President Jack Anderson said in his column today that in 1981 you passed the word to Moscow that even if the Senate ratified SALT II, you would not sign it. That in 1982, Moscow told you that they were no longer bound by the SALT II treaty, and they began to build up their arsenal over the limit. Is that true? And I'd like to follow up.
Helen, I read that myself this morning, and I went into the office and I said, where is all of this coming from? I do not remember any statement from the Soviet Union of that kind. Both countries had been, as long as it was mutual, obeying the restraints or staying within the restraints, mainly because of our efforts toward what we're now approaching arms reduction talks, that we felt that if we were going to engage in those talks, it would be far better if we did abide by an agreement that, while it had been signed, had never been ratified by our government. And I don't recall that at all. And I have to say that we know that the Soviet Union, we're sure, has violated some of the restraints now. And we know that we're coming to a point in which we have up until now been abiding by it, and as we replaced older weapons with new, we have destroyed the older ones. The Soviet Union, one of the violations of theirs has been that they were taking nuclear missile submarines out of action, but they were cutting them down and rebuilding them as cruise missile carrying submarines.
Now, to stay with the treaties that we have negotiated, like even ABM, while the new negotiations go on?
Well, we're going to stay with the treaties that are in effect, that have been ratified and are in power. We'll have a decision several months from now to make with regard to whether we join them in violating the restraints. Andrea?
Mr. President, you have said that you would need to be convinced of shifting the tax burden from individuals to corporations, as the Treasury tax plan suggests doing. But in the State of the Union speech, you committed yourself to lowering individual tax rates to 35% or lower. Now, where would you make up that revenue if not to get it from corporations?
Well, Andrea, where we're going with reducing the rates and where we're going to achieve what we call tax neutrality, or revenue neutrality, will be in the elimination of a number of exemptions that have existed and that sometimes have, well, they've been unfair in the sense that some are entitled to them and others are not. When I answered that question the other day, I misunderstood. I thought they were telling me that the plan was actually going to get a great higher percentage from business. And I mentioned the fact that I did not want to do something that would interfere with our recovery or keep business from being able to expand. And then I found out that no, there'd been a misunderstanding about that question. What we're talking about as to more revenue from business is from those elements of business that have not been paying taxes. Now, it hasn't been cheating, it's been legal, in that that's just the way some of the exemptions had worked out. And we want to change that. So there will be a reduction in rates for everyone. And where the difference will be made up is some who are not now paying taxes at all or paying very low taxes will be paying their fair share.
Are you saying, sir, that there would be no increase in the corporate share for those businesses that are now paying taxes, that only those corporations that are not paying their fair share would be affected? And again, how would you make up the difference, since just the things that you committed yourself to in the State of the Union would amount to $132 billion under the Treasury plan by 1990 when they are phased in?
Well, the Treasury plan as it is now, and while We're still going to have to review that plan, and there are some options in there that we may find aren't suitable to put into operation, but the plan works out to revenue neutral, and with a reduction in rates, and the business rate and the corporation rate is going to come down from 46% to 33% under that plan. Ralph?
Mr. President, this week in Vienna, American and Soviet officials held 2 days of talks on the Middle East. Apparently, they're most intensive on this issue for 7 years. Can you tell us anything about them? And also, Mr. President, do these talks fit into any other recent development, such as King Hussein's recent move and your talks with King Fahd last week?
No, Ralph, these talks were not anything, had nothing to do with negotiations or anything of that kind. We simply felt that it was time to exchange views with each other and make sure that there couldn't be any miscalculations that could lead to some kind of confrontation or problem, that we brought them up to date on our own views and what we thought, and they were talking on their own, and that's all.
Follow up, Mr. President. Is the Soviet government still pushing for a direct negotiating role in Middle East diplomacy?
I haven't had a full report enough to say whether they mentioned some specific things. They have tended to support the idea of a great international meeting. We don't favor that. We don't believe that there should be that many hands in the pot. Just as we're not envisioning any participation in negotiations. We have said we'll stand by and we'll help in any way we can, but these negotiations must be between the Arabs and the Palestinians and the Israelis. Let me come over here for a minute, or do you believe Sam?
Mr. President, on Capitol Hill the other day, Secretary Schultz suggested that a goal of your policy now is to remove the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. Is that your goal?
We'll remove it in the sense of its present structure, in which it is a communist, totalitarian state. And it is not a government chosen by the people. So you wonder sometimes about those who make such claims as to its legitimacy. We believe, just as I said Saturday morning, that we have an obligation to be of help where we can to freedom fighters and lovers of freedom and democracy from Afghanistan to Nicaragua, and wherever there are people of that kind that are striving for that freedom. And we're going to try to persuade the Congress that we can legitimately go forward, and hopefully go forward on a multi-year basis with the Scoop-Jackson plan for trying to bring development and help to all of Central America.
Sir, when you say remove it in the sense of its present structure, aren't you then saying that you advocate the overthrow of the present government of Nicaragua?
Well, what I'm saying is that this present government was one element of the revolution against Somoza. The freedom fighters are other elements of that revolution. And once victory was attained, the Sandinistas did what Castro had done prior to their time in Cuba. They ousted and managed to rid themselves of the other elements of the revolution and violated their own promise to the Organization of American States, and as a result of which they had received support from the organization, that their revolutionary goal was for democracy, free press, free speech, free labor unions and elections and so forth, and they have violated that. And the people that are fighting them, the freedom fighters opposing them, are Nicaraguan people who want the goals of the revolution restored. And we're going to try to help.
Is the answer yes, sir? Is the answer yes, then?
To what?
To the question, aren't you advocating the overthrow of the present government? If you
Not
want
of
to
the
substitute another form of what you say was the revolution.
Not if the present government would turn around and say, all right. If they'd say, Uncle, all right, come on back into the revolutionary government and let's straighten this out and institute the goals.
Mr. President, theologians recently criticized you for saying in defending your military budget that the scriptures are on our side. I wonder, do you think it's appropriate to use the Bible in defending a political argument?
Well, I was actually speaking to some clergymen, and I checked that with a few theologians, if it was appropriate. And, well, what I meant about appropriate, was I interpreting it correctly? Was it a warning that you should be prepared and otherwise ask for peace because you were outnumbered and well, now we would say outgunned on the other side. And they seemed to think that it was perfectly fitting. Yes. It was a caution to those people in our own country who would, if given the opportunity, unilaterally disarm us.
But, and to follow up, you don't have any problem with using the Bible in a political context?
Well, I don't think I've ever used the Bible to further political ends or not, but I found that the Bible contains an answer to just about everything and every problem that confronts us, and I wonder sometimes why we don't recognize that one book could solve a lot of problems for us. Yes.
Mr. President, I'd like to come back to the problem of the farmers. You met with some state legislators today. Afterwards, they said you're not really doing enough for the farmers. In fact, you're cutting back too much too soon. You mentioned $650 million in aid. Up on Capitol Hill, they're trying to provide another $1 billion. Where does the compromise lie in your mind?
Well, I think that what we're doing can go a long way toward meeting this problem. I think we've been encouraging some of the banks, and if you've noticed lately, some of the banks themselves out in the farming area have voluntarily reduced the interest rates on some of those outstanding loans because they want to contribute and want to help. We have spent over $50 billion on agriculture in the last 3 years. We have in the budget for this year some $15 billion. And it'll be a pretty sizable amount close to that next year. And that is in the long-range thing of the type of permanent programs that we're trying to phase out over a period of time. But I think that we are proposing measures and guarantees of loans and so forth that will meet this present crisis. And I think, because I didn't explain that this morning in my remarks, they weren't on that subject, I think maybe they're looking at the news and they don't exactly know what we have in mind and what we're going to do.
Can I follow, sir? You own a ranch. Perhaps it's a sort of a gentleman rancher's situation. I understand you don't raise cattle anymore, but you do get a tax break for one reason or another. How would you explain to the farmer in Iowa or Nebraska who can't find a break right now that kind of difference which seems to exist in this system?
The only tax break that applies to my ranch was in effect a long time before I bought the ranch. It is a law in California, and it is a law brought about in environmental interests. And that is that formerly property tax, and that's a local tax, property tax on agricultural land or just open land was based on the highest potential use of that land. And it was literally driving some farmers into sale of land, giving up farming because they could no longer afford to use as farmland or maintain as open space land that was being taxed as if it were a subdivision. And this was in place. As I say, when we bought that ranch, it is still in place. California has found that program very successful. It taxes it on that use as long as you sign a contract that you are not going to subdivide, that you are going to maintain that land, that open land. I get no income tax deductions whatsoever with regard to the ranch because the Treasury Department decided that since I couldn't be there and to run cattle or anything, that it was a hobby ranch, and I couldn't argue with them on that. Bill?
Mr. President, I wonder if we might return to Nicaragua. In answer to Sam's question, when he pressed you, you said that you seemed to be saying that you wouldn't advocate the overthrow of the government, not if the present government would turn around and say, okay, well, aren't you really saying that you want the present government out? And secondly, sir, should the United States be trying to influence the government of another nation in this hemisphere?
I think that what we're doing and what we have proposed doing is within the UN Charter and within the OAS Charter, and the right of people to do what the freedom fighters are doing. And it isn't, you can say it's like the glass half full or half empty. You can say we're trying to oust the Sandinistas by what we're saying. We're saying we're trying to give those who fought a revolution to escape a dictatorship, to have democracy, and then had it taken away from them by some of their fellow revolutionaries. We're saying we want them to have a chance to have that democracy that they fought for. And I don't think the Sandinistas have a decent leg to stand on. What they have done is totalitarian, it is brutal, cruel, and they have no argument against what the rest of the people in Nicaragua want.
Well, sir, what about the specific prohibitions by the United States Congress against the kind of conduct which would overthrow their government or provide money to do so?
What that would...
Referring to the Boland Amendment, sir, the specific prohibitions of the Congress.
I think that some of the proposals that have been made in Congress have lacked a complete understanding of what is at stake there and what we're trying to do. And
Mr. President, you will soon be making a decision on how to handle the March 31st expiration of Japanese auto import quotas. If Japanese auto sales do increase in this country, will you demand that the Japanese allow more American-made goods to be sold in their country?
well, let me just say that in commenting on anything of that kind, we have been in communication with the Japanese. We have discussions going forward now on open markets both way in improving the situation between our two countries. A deal of progress has been made. We've got a long way to go yet, but everything that we're going to decide is going to be in that context of the two of us as trading partners having fair trade and free trade between us.
Let me just follow up with no restraints. Your special trade representative has predicted a sales increase of 750,000 vehicles in this country. Will the benefits of that for consumers outweigh the adverse or the presumed adverse effects on the U.S. auto industry?
Well, the agreement that is being discussed is a voluntary agreement that the Japanese themselves instituted. And we've had a cabinet council that has, I know some of you've got information before I did on this, that is going to be coming to me with a recommendation. They have not done so as yet, but I will hear all their arguments, and I will consider them in the context of the negotiations and the communication or discussion that is going on between us and the Japanese. Yes.
Mr. President, back, if I may, to David Stockman for a moment. Even his mother thought that his comments on farmers were a bit heartless. He managed to alienate in almost the next breath almost every veterans group in the country. Admittedly, his is kind of a thankless job, but some have suggested that you could find someone who could accomplish that job with a little less rancor. What do you think, sir? Well, as I told you, I think he's expressed some regret, and at the same time, I know the circumstances, and at the time that he made some of those statements, and I know also that under the guise of a committee hearing, some of the harassment that he'd been subjected to, and I could understand a fellow blowing his cool. I think he feels, as we all do, and I certainly feel myself, yes, the farmers have a very real problem, and a lot of it has to do with policies that led to the runaway double-digit inflation that we had, in which their land became a haven for those who were seeking hedges against inflation. All of these, plus the government programs, have left them with a very real problem, and we're going to do our utmost to help them find a solution to it. If I may, sir, you want Mr. Stockman to stay on the job?
Did I say yes?
Mr. President, a number of the questions have been on our economic problems abroad. The farmers' problem, part of it is, sir, that they're priced out of the market in international trade because of the overvalued dollar. I think that's part of our problem in the auto sales abroad and in this country. We're at a disadvantage because our dollar is so valuable compared to other currencies. I wonder, sir, if you have discussed this with Mr. Baker and some of your other economic advisors, and if you have studied the possibility of taking any action by this country to try to reduce the value of the dollar against other currencies, both in Europe and in Asia.
Jim, I think that the problem, I can remember when our dollar was devalued, and there weren't very many people happy about that. I think the problem of the dollar today is that our trading partners in the world have not caught up with us in economic recovery. I think they have a ways to go in changing some rigidities in their customs and their methods of doing business and in industry. And what we really need is their recovery to bring their money up in value comparable to ours. There are two sides to this problem, as we find with the trade deficit, for example, because of our inability with the price of our dollar to sell some of our goods abroad. They are too high priced. But at the same time, you turn to the other hand and see the people in this country that are benefiting by the purchase of products which are cheap by our standards, cheap in price, not quality, in our imports, and how that has managed to hold down inflation. I think if you start toying around with trying to reduce the value of the dollar without curing this other side of the issue, we put ourselves back into the inflation spiral, and that we don't want. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. President, do you see any weakening signs in the region of the southeastern flank of NATO in the light of the last Greek attitude? And according to Washington Post, there was a story saying that the United States bases will be moved out of Athens. Do you intend to do so?
We have no plans about any moves of any kind, but all I can say about the other, and I don't think I should go farther than this, is to say that, yes, we're very concerned about some of the bilateral problems between countries there at our southern flank of NATO and the effect that they can have on the whole security of the alliance. Gary?
Mr. President, if you and Mrs. Thatcher are correct that the Soviets plan to hold hostage any progress on intermediate range and strategic weapons in the talks in Geneva in return for concessions on your part on your space defense program, how far are you willing to go in giving concessions to get an arms agreement?
We believe if the Soviets are sincere in the statements they've made about actually wanting a reduction and even the elimination of nuclear weapons, they'll stay at the table and negotiate with us. All that we have proposed and all that we're doing is engaging in research which is legal within the ABM treaty. We're not violating that treaty. And I have said repeatedly, and Prime Minister Thatcher is aware of this, that if our research does produce the possibility of such a weapon, a defensive weapon that could alter the balance, then I would be willing to come forth before any deployment and negotiate and discuss the deployment and the use of that weapon in such a way that it would be used to rid the world of the nuclear threat, not to give us any particular advantage over anyone else. We just think that the ABM treaty itself, this is one part that has been violated. The ABM treaty, in being passed, being a defensive weapon treaty, expressed the belief that this should then be accompanied by realistic reductions of nuclear weapons. And all there has been since the treaty was passed was a tremendous increase in those weapons.
Mr. President, back to tax reform for a minute. The Republican chairman of the Senate Finance Committee has floated a proposal to impose a consumption tax, and he says preferably on energy. Does this fall within the bounds of forbidden territory in your pledge for no new taxes?
Well, I would have great difficulty accepting such a proposal. I imagine that he's talking about a tax in the nature of a value-added tax. First of all, this appears to be increasing taxes, which I've said we wouldn't do. But a value-added tax actually gives a government a chance to blindfold the people and grow in stature and size. First of all, you are kind of interfering with one of the principal sources of local government levels and state governments in their use of the sales tax, since the federal government had so, you might say, confiscated the area of the income tax. But the other thing with that tax is it's hidden in the price of a product. And that tax can quietly be increased, and all the people know is that the price went up, and they don't know whether the price went up because somebody got a raise or whether the company wanted to increase profits or whether it was government. And I just am not enthused. I think I've said before, taxes should hurt in the sense that people should be able to see them and know what they're paying.
If I may follow up, sir, would you put an import tax on oil or on oil refined products in that same category?
I'm just not considering a tax of that kind.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Oh. All right. Good night. I'm sorry for that.
Will you be back next month? Come back next month, sir?
Are you considering steps against Mexico for not cooperating with us?
We're cooperating with that.
Will you be back next month?
President Reagan backing slowly out of the East Room of the White House. This is his first nationally televised news conference since he took office for a second term. You heard Andrea Mitchell of NBC News asking about the Mexican situation because Ambassador John Gavin was brought back from Mexico to discuss what is perceived by many in the administration as a kind of slowness on the part of the Mexicans in the investigation of the disappearance of an American federal drug agent. Apart from that, no real news in this news conference tonight. The president restating several of his positions. No new taxes. He praised the economy in his opening remarks. It did grow last year at 4.9%, the greatest growth since 1955. The president also saying tonight that he would like to see the Sandinistas out of there to welcome back their brothers from the revolution, but he didn't quite call for an overthrow by the United States. That's the president's news conference. I'm Tom Brokaw, NBC News, New York.
This has been an NBC News special.
And if they were to talk, they'd have to have a well-prepared agenda. And the president also said that we will stay with the plan economically. That is, no tax increase. So nothing dramatically new in the president's news conference tonight. I'm Tom Brokaw, NBC News, New York.
This has been an NBC News special.
Put some fun back in your afternoons when Hollywood's funniest and craziest stars go wild on the Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour. Weekdays. Be there.
Well, it's time for the news.
Beginning July 30th, some people are going to miss their late news.
It doesn't look like the news.
Where's the news?
Have they changed the news?
Where's the news?
The news never looked like this.
I don't think there's any news on there. There's the news.
Oh, they're playing field hockey.
Field hockey? Where's the news?
The grass is very green.
Where's the news?
They're running back and forth.
I don't think there's any news on there. There's the news.
Well, it's time for the news.
Beginning July 30th, some people are going to miss their late news.
It doesn't look like the news.
Where's the news?
Have they changed the news?
Where's the news?
The news never looked like this.
I don't think there's any news on there.
If you're looking for news this summer, don't miss a thing. Know where the news is, right where it's always been. Channel 5 News, weeknights at 10.
There's the news.
Oh, they're playing field hockey.
Field hockey? Where's the news?
The grass is very green.
Where's the news?
They're rallying back and forth.
I don't think there's any news on there.
If you're looking for news this summer, don't miss a thing. Know where the news is, right where it's always been. Channel 5 News, news that hits home, weeknights at 10.
There's the news.
Channel 5 News at 10, every night.
This Monday, June 4th, NBC will once again launch network television's most intensive campaign for news. I'm Noel Engler, Vice President of Advertising and Promotion, East Coast, and I'm here to tell you how to tie into the summer's exclusive and exciting 8-week news campaign. We're going to be sending you something that looks like this.
Tonight on NBC Nightly News, can Gary Hart get back on the winning track? Will Walter Mondale claim the Democratic presidential nomination? We'll take a look at where the candidates stand now.
And you're going to add your own piece that might look like this.
And on News Center 6, we'll bring you to the site of the 1984 World's Fair, where New Orleans will host the world's biggest party.
Then you'll combine the two of them, add some animation, and come up with something like this.
Tonight on NBC Nightly News, can Gary Hart get back on the winning track? Will Walter Mondale claim the Democratic presidential nomination? We'll take a look at where the candidates stand now.
And on News Center 6, we'll bring you to the site of the 1984 World's Fair, where New Orleans will host the world's biggest party.
Go where the news is. NBC Nightly News and News Center 6.
Now here are all the details. Every weekday, we're going to feed you 3 8-second versions of Tom Brokaw on camera. When Tom is on vacation, John Palmer will pinch hit. We'll feed you a Why or Tomorrow version like this.
Tomorrow on NBC Nightly News, can Gary Hart get back on the winning track? Will Walter Mondale claim the Democratic nomination? We'll take a look at where the candidates stand now.
This is the promo you would run the same night you receive it. It would promote the following evening's newscast. Please note that on Fridays, this Tomorrow version will be replaced by an A or Monday version, so you can produce a promo which would air Friday night and throughout the weekend. The second segment you will receive is a B or Tonight version.
Tonight on NBC Nightly News, can Gary Hart get back on the winning track? Will Walter Mondale claim the Democratic presidential nomination? We'll take a look at where the candidates stand now.
This will enable you to construct a spot which could run all day promoting that evening's local news and network news. And for those stations whose news precedes the network news, we will feed out a Brokaw version like this.
And on NBC Nightly News, America the Beautiful. Is it drowning in a sea of toxic waste? What is the government doing to protect you? Should it be doing more?
The network portion of whatever news spot you construct will always run 8 seconds, give or take a fraction. This will allow you 8 seconds for your news story and 4 seconds for a closing announced tag. Here's a sample of what a spot completed by you might look like.
Tonight on NBC Nightly News, can Gary Hart get back on the winning track? Will Walter Mondale claim the Democratic presidential nomination? We'll take a look at where the candidates stand now.
And on News Center 6, we'll bring you to the site of the 1984 World's Fair, where New Orleans will host the world's biggest party.
Go where the news is. NBC Nightly News and News Center 6.
If you've got some special effects generators and enough time, you can add some pizzazz to your spots like this.
Tomorrow on NBC Nightly News, can Gary Hart get back on the winning track? Will Walter Mondale claim the Democratic nomination? We'll take a look at where the candidates stand now.
And on News Center 6, we'll bring you to the site of the 1984 World's Fair, where New Orleans will host the world's biggest party.
Go where the news is, NBC Nightly News.
And News Center 6.
When and how are you going to receive the network portion of the promos so that you can tie in? Monday through Friday, the network portion of the network affiliate spots will be fed at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time at the beginning of the A News Extra Time feed, and again at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time as part of the Net A&P closed circuit feed. The schedule for these promos will begin on Monday, June 4th, and for the next 8 weeks, NBC affiliates will be permitted to cover 2 spots a night with the shared network local news promo. For the first time, there will also be a daytime shared position you can cover. Check your NI schedule on a daily basis for actual hit times and look for the shared news 20-second promos. In these 3 NI positions, the network will run a 20-second nightly news promo, which you can cover with your own shared network affiliate 20-second spot. We hope all of you will take part in this unique opportunity for your local news to join forces with NBC Nightly News and extend the impact of our most successful Go Where the News Is campaign. Now keep your tape machines rolling for the animation and music elements that will make your tie-in participation the best yet. Let's all be there.